a question there, and we're really asking you to share a tip that you might have for maintaining presence in the workplace when somebody is on extended leave. So have a little think about that just while we're waiting for everyone to come in, and pop your response on slido.com. All right, guys. Well, welcome everybody. I'm very excited to introduce webinar number 17 of our series. And we've got some fabulous guests today that I'll introduce in just a moment. If you just joined us, we have a question on Slido there that we'd like you to think about. And I think Isabel will pop that on the chat as well. So the question is really, and you can see that somebody has written in, one of you maybe, and said, you know, most of my research and job opportunities come from being in the right place at the right time and generally visible. So how do I ensure people still think of me when I, you know, for research or job opportunities, when I can't network because I'm physically out of the workplace? So share a tip or an idea that you might have on Slido for maintaining that presence. I actually had maintaining visibility, and I thought, no, maybe it's maintaining presence that's important. So thank you, everybody. That's the question that we're posing for you to think about today. And I am going to now move on to introduce our seminar, which is about rebooting your academic career after an extended leave. And it's lovely to see some faces, some familiar faces out there. So just remember, please do turn off your microphone, but we love to see your face. If you have any problems, feel free to message the support team using the chat function. And as usual, I encourage you to not be a typical female and multitask and do 50 billion things while you're doing the seminar, and just try and focus on yourself for this hour. I'd like to acknowledge the people of the Noongar, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation here in Western Australia, in Perth, and I pay my respect to elders past, present and emerging. And feel free to share on chat the land that you're on today that you acknowledge. So what we're going to do today is I'm first of all just going to, I'm actually going to do a bit of advertising and share with you some of the previous webinars that we've done that are relevant to this topic, and share a couple of videos from some of our laureates. And then I will hand you to Dr. Rachel Potter, who does research on this topic, especially around people being on parental leave. So she will share with you some of her research findings. And then finally, we'll go to ARC Laureate Professor Kerrie Mengersen from QUT, who will give some insights and tips from her personal perspective, and she's waving at you right now. And then we will be introducing a new question asker, which is Annika, a new PhD student of mine, and she's waving at you, and she will be governing the questions. So again, feel free to put questions in chat as we proceed. Just want to remind you, the whole point, I guess, of this series, which we call the Small Win series, is really captured in this slide here. And it's just this very simple idea, but one that we can forget sometimes, which is that if there's something we're trying to do, a goal we've got, and it might be getting back to work, you know, if you're on maternity leave or you're on sick leave or something right now, your goal might be going back to work and getting back into work again. That's a huge goal. But how do we chunk it into those small steps that are going to get us there? And how do we get those small wins? And as you can see from that picture there, you know, it's sometimes about breaking these big, overwhelming tasks into these smaller chunks and then celebrating the success of those small wins as we go. So as I said, I'm going to do a little bit of advertising because we asked people to send in questions when they register, and a lot of the questions were topics that we've covered to some extent already. So I want to remind you of relevant webinars and material on our website. So one of the questions that one of you guys asked is, how do you balance primary caregiver tasks, reduced like part-time FTE, and then also have a research career? So how do you do it all is basically the question. And we do have a webinar we did very early in our series on staying sane whilst managing homework challenges. So I recommend that one to you. We also, if you're not familiar, we also have a website where we've got a lot of content, not just the webinars. So, and what you can see on that content is there's videos from female laureates that that I'm actually going to share with you, a couple in just a moment, who talk about some of these issues. So I just encourage you to go and hear what they have to say. So who we're going to hear from in just 1 second is Lisa Cooley, Professor Lisa Cooley, an ARC Laureate Fellow, who now has actually gone off to run some big institute in Harvard, I believe. And so when I click this button, hopefully you'll hear from Lisa giving some of her tips about responding to this question of juggling everything.
One of the best bits of advice that I read when I first had children, I read lots of things on the internet from other people who'd had children and were continuing a full-time job. And the best bit of advice I read, the only one that I actually remember, is lower the bar. Lower the bar, and that means you don't have to provide your family a fantastic meal every night. You don't have to clean all the time. You don't have to clean up after them if you don't want to. The most important thing is that you're just there for them when they need it, and you're spending the time with them that you feel is needed. And the other things can wait, especially when they're young. You can't possibly get all this stuff done as well as spending quality time with the kids, and you don't have that much quality time, right, because you're working as well. And so over time you get better at juggling these things, and the kids get older and they're doing more things as well, so it gets better. But I think just lowering the bar and not expecting yourself to be superwoman at home, and just do what you feel you need to do with spending time with the kids is the most important thing.
So prioritise in some senses. Okay, so that's Lisa. I've been spectacularly successful at lowering the bar. You're welcome to talk to my partner and children. They will share that with you as well. So now we go to another female laureate sharing her tips on this topic.
For the period of my kids' life, I've been a bit of a workaholic, and actually I that's partly down to them. I had twins, and I always say that I then acquired a work ethic. I learned how to manage time and how to get stuff done, and it was really being a mother that taught me how to be a multitasking academic. I think I was quite time wasteful before that, and certainly not as focused.
So, and one more just to conclude.
I manage by not prioritising housework.
Yeah.
So I try to buy clothes that don't need ironing. So I have not ironed anything for years.
Right.
I don't iron. And I try to buy clothes that don't need dry cleaning, so I can wash them in the hand washing cycle of the...
Yeah.
So minimise housework, because for me that's a drudgery that has led to women taking on those roles because that's what they do. So I just don't do it. Yeah. And I have a very high threshold for dirt in my house. Go madly cleaning up if I have visitors, but that's not important to me. Yeah. What's important is that there is a good environment and a healthy, happy environment for people if they need it.
So those are just a little glimpse of three of our laureates. The second person there was Professor Jill Bennett. And I love what she said, actually, that she really only learnt to be good at managing her time when she had children. And I think that's a really important insight, you know, that can sometimes come, whether you're extended leave is children or illness, you know, that you actually do learn new skills. You often think about the world in a different way as a result, and those can have real benefits too for your work. So although we're going to focus today on some of the challenges, just also want to remind that there can be skills and benefits that emerge from these as well. I love the suggestion there from our third female laureate saying, you know, buy clothes that don't need ironing. I mean, this is a great tip. And I guess two of those female laureates just saying, yeah, you know, what is important. And you might decide that housework is really important. That's fine. That's your choice. But prior thinking, at least thinking and reflecting on what really is important. We also have, here's another question that came from a participant. How do I navigate part-time work expectations and workload? And this is a big issue, especially for women, because as we know from previous discussions on this webinar, you know, women do more of the citizenship in organisations. They do more of the sitting on committees, student sorts of support, etc. We know that that is true. So what happens when you go part-time and you've got to manage these expectations? And so I encourage you to look at our webinar saying no and speaking up. You know, sometimes those skills are really, really important when you transition to a part-time role, because you will have to say no to things. And we have websites also on time management and so on that I encourage you to look at. And then the third, another question, what are some tips on finding the motivation to return back from maternity leave? So how do I get myself back into wanting to be at work? And there I encourage you to look at our webinar on job crafting. So that was really all about how actually one of the great benefits of being an academic, although sometimes, to be honest, it can feel a bit under threat. But, you know, one of the benefits is that we do have some autonomy in our work. So how do we use that autonomy to craft and shape our job to be one that really fits us? And that's what that webinar is all about. So I'm going to stop there today because we have as a guest today, Dr. Rachel Potter from the University of South Australia. And she is a research fellow at Uni of South Australia's Psychosocial Climate Global Observatory. And she's currently running a big national project on pregnancy and parental discrimination in the workplace, which includes this issue of returning to work. So I'm going to hand to Rachel, who we'll hear from for about 10 minutes, and then we'll go to Kerrie, and then we'll open up for some questions. So welcome, Rachel, and look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you. I'll just get my slides up. Everyone can see? Yep, wonderful.
Yes, great.
Yes. So thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here and present on this topic. It's, I think, a very important topic. My background is psychology, and I specialise in work and organisational psychology in various different topics. But this topic in particular has kind of come to the forefront of my mind lately, and that's why I've embarked on this national project, which I'll share more about. So obviously leave comes in many forms, but in this little presentation, I'm looking at it through the perspective of parental leave, pregnancy, and then returning to work. Just before I begin, I just want to acknowledge the research team that supported me in getting this project together, especially Sophie Richter, and also these wonderful partners I have down listed here, like the ACTU, who have been really instrumental in sharing and promoting the survey. Just really key partners and so important to getting the topic out there. So I just wanted to start off by looking at the current context that we face and challenges that we face when we take parental leave. And then I'm going to touch on our study that we've created, and also some early findings, which are really interesting, providing some recommendations and insights based on those findings, and some resources. And I'll provide some of my tips, but I've cut them down to 3 because I know Sharon's already provided some wonderful resources to you all with further tips there. Okay, so I won't go through these too much in detail because of time, but I just want to recap. There are a lot of challenges that women experience from taking leave. I think there's a real structural inequality around parental leave in Australia compared to other countries. And while we might have it better than some more developing countries in this respect, we still have a problem where females in particular are put in the position of having to take the bulk of leave, and it's not distributed equally with the partner, which it's a bit of an issue. We also have the cognitive load of experiencing guilt. So no matter what we do, if we go back early, if we go back late, we're always going to have an element of guilt, and that's difficult to navigate. Some research as well has seen, obviously, lack of sleep, returning to work with kids is a massive issue, and studies have shown this is particularly the case for mothers rather than other parents. So we also have to deal with those kind of biological challenges. When you go back, you're navigating your identity again as a mother, your self-perception, but rather also trying to navigate how others might see you differently now. So that's a big challenge. Other ones are saying no, having boundaries, having a lack of knowledge or awareness of your rights, which is something I want to really reinforce today. And also just to point out that working in universities, we're actually at a really high risk in industry already for mental health. A lot of the research we've done nationally through the research centre I'm involved in has found that universities actually are quite not doing so well in terms of workers' mental health. So if you couple that with all the challenges of leave, it's quite problematic. We also have a very performance-focused industry where we have to get publications to be deemed successful. There's that pressure to keep growing. We work on more project-based work and short contracts, especially in research roles. So it is hard to kind of take leave when we're in those positions where we need to be involved in a project, ongoing. So the reason I wanted to kind of share why I think this is really important, and this is what kind of initiated this project for me, is this is my son, my Darcy, 3 years old on the slide here. So I have lived through this this experience recently and during COVID of having a child and having to return to work. I've had numerous friends say to me, "Oh, I've gone back to work. They've completely changed my role, but that's okay because that's best for the company." And I had so many of these stories. I thought, well, this can't be right. What's being done about it? And I also wanted to point out, just with this slide here, that oftentimes this issue is seen as a very female/male issue. But as you see on the slide, my partner is actually a non-binary identifying person, and it's not all about a heterosexual problem of females and males. We still have our challenges despite being two females. So we shift our focus. It's more of a primary caregiver challenge than just a female challenge, I guess, if that makes sense. So at the moment, we can see some stats here. There's 20% of households that have young children, and it's steadily increasing. So it's a really kind of prevalent issue with lots of parents and people going on leave. At the same time, we know that big studies have found that almost half of mothers have experienced discrimination during some point of taking leave or being pregnant or returning to work. About half of this, fathers and partners experience discrimination too, but at 27%. So it's a shockingly high statistic from this report done, almost 10 years ago now. So I really wanted to look at, what's going on in the current world of work, where are we sitting, where are we tracking, and that's why we've set up this study. And discrimination can be lots of different things. It doesn't have to be like, yelling at the person. It can be providing an unrealistic workload or unreasonable hours. So it's quite a wide definition. So our study extends upon previous research from the Australian Human Rights Commission. We've extended upon their questions and kind of updated them. Also added in some academic scales to do with the negative acts, burnout, psychosocial safety, climate, etc. We've been really gender inclusive, so we've asked both men and women to participate, but also, non-binary transgender persons, we've had quite an exhaustive list there. And we wanted to capture quantitative and qualitative information. And we've taken in lots of contextual information too about leave taken, the types of leave taken, and challenges surrounding that. So I won't go through all of this because it's a lot, but you can see that we've got quite a national reach already of our survey, mostly in South Australia, but it's getting there. Interestingly, I think we've broken the gender identity down just into these 4 categories for the purpose of this slide, but you can see that it's very female dominated. Even though males were invited to participate, you can see it's quite an issue that's really attracting female attention. And most of our respondents are in a period of being in a phase of returning to work. So now I just wanted to share with you some of the findings we've had already, which are really quite confronting. So if we look at those that have experienced pregnancy in the workplace, we've found that almost 1 in 10 were not granted leave to attend their appointments for pregnancy-related illness or other appointments. 27.5% felt they needed to hide their pregnant belly, and almost over 70% were exposed to unmanageable workloads. This isn't even all of the information I wanted to include. There's a lot more. For example, I think 9% of the sample we've looked at were actually denied breaks to use the toilet. So it's quite concerning as well what's happening. As well, the pregnant women in our survey said they received no information about their leave entitlements. They had less success in getting promotions, and some had their contracts not renewed. So not receiving information about your leave entitlements is actually very, it's illegal. You should receive information about that, and that's something I'll touch on later on in the presentation. For those on parental leave, we found 14% said they felt their employer was unsupportive. Their partners didn't have access to or were denied flexible work arrangements, which is again very difficult. A lot would like to have taken more time to care for their child. 24% didn't receive a pay rise or a bonus or a less pay bonus than their peers. 22% had tasks and jobs altered against their wishes. And again, this is illegal. You should have consultation with your employees if you're changing their work role. And 16% had their role permanently replaced. And finally, the return to work statistics we've looked at, 1 in 2 of our respondents received negative or offensive remarks regarding being seen as a less committed employee, which I found really quite shocking. Almost half were expected to meet their deadlines even when their children were sick or they were sick. And almost 30% were provided with less opportunities for career advancement or promotion. So it's just, to me, it's quite confronting. Even though I was expecting some sort of interesting findings, these have surpassed what I was thinking. And we've found also relationships with experiencing discrimination such as this with certain outcomes, so increased burnout and things like that. Fortunately, a lot of people had flexible work arrangements, but again, no information about their return to work entitlements. Quite a lot, 19% were not provided appropriate breastfeeding or expressing facilities. And just for some context too, with the qualitative results, we found some really impactful quotes here. I'll just read out one. I was told I wouldn't want to return to work as I would be clucky. My career was severely impacted by my pregnancy and I was forced to give up my team leader role. So we've had quite a few responses like this where women are put or kind of invited to feel disempowered through taking leave. So what can we do about it? So I think based on this, previous research and our national study at the moment, it's quite a prevalent issue. So you really, I think the most powerful way to feel empowered and to have conversations about this is to know your rights, your legal rights, and be really informed about your entitlements. So there's various laws in place that are there to protect women or those on leave that I think is really useful to become familiar with, so you feel empowered to know what you are entitled to. So I won't go through all of these, but hopefully I can share the slides with you after. But the Human Rights Commission provides information here. There's specific laws for breastfeeding and what you're entitled to. The Fair Work Act has really great employment standards that really specifies your rights, such as your keeping in touch days, which you're entitled to. So you can come back and have training even when you're on leave if you'd like. So, you know, there's things in place that are designed to make sure women are not put in inferior positions at work. You have consultation rights while on parental leave. You have the right to return to work, and you have the right to request flexible work arrangements. Same with work health and safety laws. You have the workplace has a responsibility to ensure it's healthy and safe for all workers. And we have quite a good union at the university. So join the National Tertiary Education Union. They can support you and others in ensuring that you do get these rights. So based on the research and the literature, I just wanted to get across the importance of really vocalizing and establishing expectations with employers, particularly in relation to your legal rights, and setting up support networks around that too. So use your keeping in touch days if you'd like, you know, access your flexible work arrangements, and know there must be a consultation while you're on leave or when you return to leave about your role. So as well, the university has a really great equal opportunity policy that you can access and fall back on when there's promotions. For example, too, you have the opportunity to put forward your achievements relative to opportunity, and the university take into consideration really seriously your leave and how that plays into your achievements. So you shouldn't be disadvantaged. At this, along this line, the ARC for grants also have considerations for caring responsibilities and leave. So again, that should be something that's taken into consideration for progress on projects and so forth. And something that Sharon mentioned before is that there's really can be positive outcomes associated with taking leave and returning, like these work-life enrichment facets. So you appreciate your time more. You have kind of that ability to transfer skills of time organisation that you've learnt from maybe home life into your work life. And that's something I personally found, you know, I've never will take for granted my time anymore. I use it much more effectively after becoming a parent. I just wanted to leave you with my top tips. I think that I've learnt personally from returning from leave is that if you do want to stay involved in your work and your research, you know, you can still be involved, but just scale your involvement down. Maybe delegate certain tasks to other people, but make sure you're involved in some sort of capacity. So therefore you can step back into that role or that project later on when you do have more time, but you're not missing out on the opportunity. Have a transition plan at home and at work. So, you know, with your partner or with your support network, as well as with your employer, but do expect disturbances. You know, childcare is rife with germs, and you probably will have to take leave as well to care for the child. So have a discussion around what does that look like in terms of further leave being taken. And also prioritise your daily tasks really intentionally. So that job crafting aspect Sharon mentioned, make sure you prioritise the really big ticket items like writing papers or, you know, doing something that's going to have impact rather than just your email inbox sorting out, for example. I'll just leave you with some really great resources that I've found. So the Supporting Working Parents website has a whole bunch of this information in terms of your legal rights, obligations. It has divided it into resources for employees and employers. That's really helpful. There's a great advocacy organisation too called the Parenthood, who do a lot of work in this area for obviously advocating for parents in the workplace. There's Transitioning Well, which is all about transitioning back to work after leave. And in South Australia, we have the Working Women's Centre, which is a great contact for those who have experienced discrimination when returning from work, leave. So hopefully I can share this with you via email too, but I just wanted to encourage you as well to get part of the national study we're doing. We still want to boost our numbers up. You have a chance to win 3 of $100 gift cards, and I can provide all the resources you need if you want to share it with your networks as well. So thank you very much. Thank you. I hope I was okay with time.
Absolutely. Thank you,
Okay,
Rachel.
wonderful.
Yeah,
Thank
look,
you.
it's such an important study that you're doing, and you know, very, as you say, somewhat disturbing findings. So thank you for sharing. And I noticed that Isabel has popped that survey up on the chat.
Oh,
so you will be able to see that. So we will have some, if you have questions for Rachel, pop them in the chat and Annika will pick them up later. But I'm delighted now to introduce ARC Laureate Fellow Professor Kerrie Mengersen, who is from Queensland University of Technology, as I said before. And Kerrie is a Distinguished Research Professor in Statistical Sciences and Director of the QUT Centre for Data Science. And she has many other accolades that you can read for yourself there. But very happy to invite Kerrie, and Kerrie is going to share some of her tips as a successful laureate in this whole challenge of returning to work and coming back after extended leave. So welcome, Kerrie, and over to you.
Thanks, Sharon. Thank you very much for this invitation. I'm 35 years ago, I had my first child, so it's been a while, and I've got 3 children. And but some of the issues are still very much the same about having kids taking leave and coming back to work. And so I was delighted to have this invitation, but also very dismayed to hear some of the results of the study that was just presented there. That you know, we're still trying to battle through a lot of the same issues, and people are still facing the same kinds of challenges. So so hang in there, all the people who are in this situation, and I'm guessing that a lot of the people who are on this call are, and many people who aren't on this call because they're busy doing the things that they would be doing without being on this call, so on this webinar. You know, it is a really big time, and I'd just like to talk about 4 things, just to these are very quick to touch on before we go to discussion. Firstly, I'd like to talk about the fact that there are changes. So we need to acknowledge changes in our lives when we have kids or any kind of major disruption in our work, and especially around kids. So there are neurological changes that we have. There are biological changes. There are personal changes in our personal lives, and of course there are social changes as well. And then we have the professional changes. So we just have to sort of lean into the fact that there are these changes and understand that you know, we aren't going to be the same. You know, we aren't going to be the same kind of person or professional that we were before, because we just have these different challenges and time constraints. Now, having said that, that's not about a sort of a diminished professional life. It's about a different professional life. And I think trying to find out, as we have now, and we have much more now than we did when I had my kids around, you know, what are some tips and strategies that people use for that? What are people doing in the workplace, in our own workplaces, to overcome or to meet some of those challenges? I think, you know, finding that out is really important. I really like the comment about knowing your rights and knowing like what's you know, what you are entitled to, but also really having conversations with the people that you need to have conversations with at work about this. So when you knowing that you're going to be taking leave and you feel that it's an appropriate time to be talking about that, and that's also a comment, my own personal accounts, but also then you know, a lot of the students and postdocs that I've had working with me over the period of time, you know, like when do I talk about this with my supervisors and my workplace? When you do feel that's time, then start to set up a plan. Like, okay, this is not something that's unique. Like this is part of and there is a process now. So we are in now a situation where we need to set up a process. It's like any kind of major challenge in our lives. We need to figure out, like, we're here now, we need to be getting to a certain point, and we need to work through what is the process that's going to get us through that period. And so if there's a head of school or a supervisor, what is the plan that we're going to put in place to get us there? And to talk about not only setting up that plan, but how do I flag issues when that plan is not working as well as we need it to, on both sides. And what's the conversations, and who's going to be part of those conversations? And I think sometimes we feel that we're not in a position to start that conversation around that, setting up those plans, but we are. I mean, this is our lives, so the life of the person that's going through this, and so we need to be setting that up. I want to talk also about the fact that kids cope. So there's some of the comments around ironing or housework, and that one of my big stresses was making socks match in the wash, after they come out. I don't know, maybe it's just my household, but there's always the missing socks when you've got a house full of kids, and or even without them, actually, which is amazing. But once you lean into the fact that you and your kids can wear mismatched socks, I think that that's fine, and thank you, Emma, for joining in that. I think that that's like these kinds of small things that we set up as big sort of bars for ourselves, like just lean into the fact that it's not going to happen. Also, kids cope with, I used to say that I set up the fridge so that according to their height was what kind of food they could eat. So the little kids, when they open the fridge, could reach the shelves with food that they could get out for themselves, and the bigger kids could get other sorts of food. So just things that the bigger kids also got the little kids' food, which didn't sort of work, but figured out in the end. One of the things I found really useful was to try to build a community like this is with your kids, because one of the problems is, like, you've got kids sick. We know this, the kids are sick, you're sick. It's just so much, put them in daycare and they get sick and that kind of stuff. So building sort of what's the support network, and I think it's really hard in our societies, and even for when I was going through, to find out how to do that. And each person is different. Some people have family support. I didn't at the time. Great family, but they weren't anywhere near me. But what I did, for example, for my second child, I was somewhat serendipitous, but I was in hospital having my son, my second child, and another person who I found out worked at the university. I was up at Central Queensland University at the time, and she was working in a different role in the university. So we decided to, she had one child about the same age as my first child. And so we decided to job share, not the same job, but to spend half time at work. And we either had 4 children or no children. So, I mean, I think we were crazy, but actually it worked out well for the working stuff. But, that kind of thing, and also we could sort of help each other out at work if we needed to. Can you mind my child? And one of the great things about a university is that we do have a little bit of flexibility, but there are times when we need to teach and we need to be at those meetings. So is there a way that we can sort of work on campus around that? I think so there's that kind of thing around just building a community. How are we going to cope when we go back to work with the issue of daycare, and talking about that with our supervisors and our heads of school about what's their advice in this sort of situation, because we don't have to do this alone. There is a lot of support, institutional support. People are on our side, but we have to take the lead in that. I want to also talk about that support, and I've talked a little bit about it, but also knowing what institutional support there is, and also suggesting to our heads of school or our supervisors around other kinds of support. So find out things that people are doing. For example, one of the things that I found really useful and I really appreciated from QUT was that they provided financial support to go to a conference and have childminding when I was on leave. So that sort of I felt connected still to the community. I think finding, they also now provide a research assistant for when you're on leave to do some of the work to help you to keep your research going. There's also small grants for people who have returned from leave. So find out what those kinds of opportunities are in the university and make use of them. Thinking of the setting up of a plan and with the supervisor or your head of school, what I also find useful is to keep a diary while you're like when you're ready in a pregnancy, and then also while you're on leave and when you come back, what's happening in your professional life and what kind of time do you need out? What kind of support have you received? What kind of conversations you've had? Now, that's the sort of the time you go, oh my goodness, I can't possibly write a diary. But even just the notes you might make every now and then about that really helps when you're reflecting on what kind of support did I receive? What were the kinds of constraints I came up against, especially if you're finding major obstacles, but even minor ones. And also what kind of, especially the time out, because we all know that when we're writing our CV now, and this has also been mentioned, you're writing a CV, then you can account for the time. It's relative, your activities relative to opportunity. I think that this is really important because, talking about that and accounting for that time is going to be really important. I want to also flag that in terms of like keeping up your, well, let me talk about this first. When like this sort of keeping up with your research and teaching and keeping up with the being present and being valued is really important for us. So when we come back to work and when we're in those initial stages of work after returning from extended leave, trying to set up beforehand the good research network and the co-authors. What papers can you have in preparation? So when you get back, you're going to be able to work on those with the quarter of a brain or half a brain that you have to put to your work, or in those scraps of time that you've got. So can you have something that's sort of ready to go that you can keep the momentum on with your research? Can you talk to your co-authors or your research network around, okay, I'm going to be going on leave. What can I do? Or can we sort of, I can do something now and then you can do something later. How can I make sure that my research continues as I go? Even with teaching, can you come up with like who is going to be the substitute for you so that you can maybe borrow and put back for time if you need to take time out? I'm going to talk mostly about research, these papers in preparation and having these kinds of research networks. What I found really useful was having some senior colleagues who were prepared to talk about work with me while I had kids climbing up my legs. You've got kids like sitting on your lap or climbing up your knees, or you need to be over giving them some food or whatever, but somebody would still be willing to talk to your brain, and that was really important for me to have those kinds of, brain conversations while and allowing for the things you do with kids at the same time. I think it's important.
Kerrie. Sorry, I'm just going to ask you to just wrap up. So
sure,
we have
yeah.
a little bit
I'm
of
sorry,
time
yeah.
for discussion.
Certainly, yeah.
Thank you.
A couple of the things I think is really important in terms of research is when you're looking at your CV, writing the time taken, but also looking at the gaps in your CV. What are you missing that you could do while you're on leave? So, for example, can you do something around your tertiary education or something reflective learning or something that you can add to your CV during leave? Keep a good social media profile if you can, because that keeps you in people's mind. Invite yourself to seminars. We give seminars online a lot now, so you can, dial up your university or your other network universities and say, hey, can I give an online seminar? It's something you can do at a time, even if you need to record it or just do it at a time. And look at what you can do while you're on leave. So new topics or new skills that you can add to your CV. And on that note then, Sharon, I'll leave it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kerrie. I feel I could sum up what you're saying there is really be proactive and planned, because you're really talking about proactive conversations, being willing to go to your head of school, make suggestions, you know, and of course we want our institutions to be doing better, but in the absence of that, sometimes it's just what we can do within our control. So great advice. And I'm delighted now to introduce Annika Mertens, who is a new PhD here at the Centre for Transformative Work Design. And she is going to first, I think, share the Slido and then ask us some questions. So welcome, Annika. Thank you for taking on this role, and over to you.
Hello. Hi, everyone. I'm happy to be part of this seminar, and I'm gonna share the results of the Slido from the very beginning from the presentation. Can you see my screen?
Yes, that's great.
All right, yeah, and we see here some answers and tips that already fit to what Rachel and Kerrie already said. So keep in touch days, for example, or try to keep your social media profile up to date. Go to social events even though you're not currently at the workplace. Things like that. Keep in touch. Try to respond to emails even though you're not working currently. And yeah, join to I really like the coffee catch up and check in, because that, like, all these social aspects of work, they are really a big part of connecting and staying in touch. So even though you're not working, maybe there are seminars or other social events that you can join. So that fits really well with what Rachel and Kerrie already pointed out. Is there anything you want to comment on this, Sharon, or you want to add?
No, that's terrific. Just hit us with a few questions, I think would be great. Annika.
All right, just a sec, then I stop the sharing. So yeah, there were some additional questions that were sent beforehand and also in the live chat. So one of them was, since Australia doesn't provide equally shared parental leave, how do we get our partners to take a shared equal, like to share the household and the childcare?
So Kerrie, do you want to kick off on that one? And then we'll go to you, Rachel.
Yeah, I think each case is different, and everybody has to work this out themselves. You know, I think what people see even as equal changes. So my partner did a lot, but and he certainly believed he was doing half, but I think we have different versions of what half is, and so we just have to figure that out. But certainly I think being proactive and knowing your rights and figuring this out is part of a partner's role as well. That is the same thing. I'm going to be going on leave, or my partner's having a baby, or we're having a child. How do I approach this? What's the plan for this? Keeping a record of like, how do we go forward with this is really important, I think, and people are aware of it.
Yeah.
Rachel.
I agree. I think it depends on the family or the situation, but some partners ask for flexible work arrangements, and that has been the case for a lot of my friends, and it's been very helpful. If maybe the other parent works 4 days, in my case that's not possible, but I would say that I had a kind of agreement with my partner where if the child was sick, which happened a lot in the first year of childcare, that the partner would take the leave to care for that child. So it's a bit more equal in that sense. But I guess it can be really tricky to navigate, especially if the mother is breastfeeding and, or I don't know, it just falls on the mother a lot. So it's very difficult to navigate. I think it's something that needs to be improved.
One of the things we've talked about before in these series, and you can see some great quotes from other female laureates, giving general advice to younger women. And one of them is choose your partner wisely. I mean, honestly, I would say take this into account. Don't fall in love with anyone unless they're going to actually, and honestly quite serious about that too, because, I think it's a big, big, big issue that we don't talk about enough. I have many friends, highly competent, educated people, and yet they still do 80-90% of the domestic, and it disappoints. They don't disappoint me. The situation is so disappointing.
Yeah.
So look, I think, and the other thing I would just add into that picture is, it's okay to be incompetent at stuff. Honestly, sometimes I feel like it's a mental battle with who's going to sweep the floor first. And just being prepared, as those other people said, it's if you're one of those neat freaks, for example, it's harder, right? Because you don't want to let go of that. But sometimes it's only with you letting go that it allows other people to pick up. So also some competence. And so I did see the comment that maybe we shouldn't use this negative labeling. It's really about prioritizing. And so prioritize. And maybe the dirty floor is not such a big issue. So thank you, Annika. We got another question. I think we can fit in a couple more.
Yeah, we got some more career-related questions. So
I just saw the comment from Emma. Sorry.
Sorry?
That's okay. Continue.
How much does it actually damage the career if you're on leave, or how do you reestablish yourself? Is it actually as much of a damage as we think? So yeah, that would be maybe.
Kerrie, I'll jump in first. And I mean, I think Rachel's got more to say about this, but I think the difficulty is on the panel here. We've got people who have stayed in. Well, for me, for example, I've stayed in the career. So I think that's I'm just basically saying it's hard for me to answer that, and I think we need to be talking to the people who didn't make it through. So Rachel, you've probably got more to say.
Yeah. So was the question, how do we reestablish ourselves when we come back from leave? Yeah, I think, I just want to address particularly this kind of message in the chat, told to work while on leave. I just want to say, I think in terms of that, we are entitled to our leave, and you don't have to work during your parental leave to keep anything going. It's your right to step away, but just having those expectations around what you want. You can either try and keep in touch, and maybe you'd like to stay and do keeping in touch days, or maybe you don't. So it's just having that conversation with your employer, so you get across what you need as a mother, as a person, and as a worker. So I think, when you come back, there's that pressure to have just picked off, start off as you've left kind of thing. But it does take time, and I think we need to remember our rights. What we were doing when we're on leave is extremely important, if not more important, because you're raising a human and caring for humans. So I think take away the pressure of having to quickly reestablish yourself. Just focus on, enjoying your work, what you are passionate about, and it will fall into place. There's no rush. And I think there's systems built into universities in particular that allow for those disruptions. And going through a promotion process recently myself, that was a big part of it, was looking at, okay, this person had a baby, they work part-time, and I had to be very clear and use those processes to make my argument, for what I'd done was sufficient for promotion despite my leave. And I think that was taken very seriously, but you still have to be confident with that. And that's why I think knowing your rights and knowing that you're entitled to your leave, you're not having a break from your career, you are doing something fundamental for society, and then you're coming back to a job that you should be entitled to continue as you wish. So yeah, I just feel like some more girl power here. We need, it's about keeping on, and and just don't be so hard on everyone's self, just take it gently, I think.
I
when
think
you
that's a
return.
great point, Rachel, about sort of self-compassion, and we've talked about that before with mental health issues in academia. The other thing I would just add to the equation is the importance of allowing people to be different. And you said that, Rachel. So some people have said in the chat that you must not work when you're on leave. And if that's what if you don't want to work when you're on leave, go for it. You have that right. There are other people who will want to do it differently, and that's okay. Okay, so I was one of those people who I felt intense jealousy when I saw my partner coming home from work. I was at home with 2 twins. I have to say, hated it. And I went back to work after 6 weeks, and it was the right decision for me. I would not impose that decision on anyone else, but it was the right decision for me, and I don't regret it. I regret other things in my life and career. I don't regret that decision. So I also want people out there, who are doing things differently to feel okay about that. One of the things is really important is the perspective. It's really hard when you're in the moment and you feel like your career's going down the tube and everything's happening. When you've got this lot, it is a career. It's not just the next 6 months. And I remember that panicked feeling of, oh my gosh, everything's, but when you're here in the long haul, things pan out okay in the end. So that's, again, part of that self-compassion, I think, that you mentioned, Rachel. Not be too hard on yourself, whichever decisions you make. Annika, I think we might have time to squeeze in one more quick question.
Okay, very, very quick. There was some questions about the employer side or the university side. So what can or should universities do to support women after extended leave, or what is already going on?
Rachel, do you want to start?
Yeah, I think more needs to be done in the university sector. I think there needs to be more job security, because I can also see in the chat, comments about fixed term contracts, and I can't agree more, and I don't have the answer to it, but I think how it's set up is very difficult for women. If you think of, like, even I think about it, you've got X amount of years left on your project. If you have a baby now, how's that going to impact you going forward? And it is really scary, and I don't have an answer for that, but I think that universities should offer more security for workers, have more opportunity to get secure positions. So yeah, that's my belief.
Thank you, Rachel.
Yeah.
Kerrie. You're on mute, Kerrie, if you're talking.
Yeah, no, I was in the chat. I don't have anything really to add to that. So I think that what we can do is, as a community, we can, there's a lot of goodwill in the universities, and I think that there's also a lot of the things that we've been hearing about with respect to, insecurity of jobs and the unconscious biases and the way that people consider employing people on short-term contracts and the influence of taking long leave on that. So these things don't go away. But I think if we join the communities in our universities about trying to keep the presence of these kinds of conversations, keep these conversations going, keep it in the minds of people, then all we can do is just work together to try to change some of these things. There are good programs in the universities, and I think the universities are keen to support them. So if we find out about the programs within our own universities, but also share what other universities are doing, then we can bring those opportunities into our own institutions. And then, some of those things are going to be great for us.
Thank you, Kerrie. And on that note, what we might do is set up a session where we focus on some of the things that universities are doing, because we did that in regard to some of the other challenges women face around bias. We did a great session on that. So we might do that as a follow-up. And that can be more, what is some of the innovative good things your universities are doing or not? And that might be a nice way of keeping that conversation going. So look, at this point, it's 12 o'clock. I just want to thank everyone for, once again, a fabulous conversation. Thank our guest, Rachel. Wonderful presentation, and so great to get the evidence base for some of this conversation. And Kerrie, it's fantastic to meet you and have you sharing your wisdom over many years. And finally, thank you, Annika, for being our great question answerer. And thanks, of course, to Isabel and others behind the scenes. So thanks all. I can't remember the topic for next time, but we will let you know, and hope to see you all again.
Thanks very much,
Thank
Sharon.
you.
Take care,
Thanks,
guys.
Annika.
See you
Bye,
later.
Rachel.
Bye.
Bye.